Oh.
You said let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, pun not intended, but I'll go ahead and take the credit for the pun for the in this case, yeah, quite the double entendre. I've never managed a triple. I think I've claimed a triple on more than a few occasions, but I've never gotten to a triple entendre.
Mm, that would be impressive.
Today might be the day. We'll see.
If there's any category to do it in, it's probably sex.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the inference of our language taken from the French. Um, Hi, I'm Brendan McNamara. This is Totally Classic, where two friends navigate the world, really, with curiosity and love and different fields of interest and different points of perspective, um, hoping to provide at least an example of how to navigate what some people refer to as difficult conversations, or some people even verboten conversations. Let's talk about everything, folks, and let's let's stop being so worried about things we don't need to be worried about. And hey, folks, let's stop creating scenarios that invoke worry when really we're all just trying to figure this thing out. And I say all in a statistical sense. There are some people who are, of course, in the world who are absolutely malicious actors and live to destroy you. But I think most folks are just stumbling in the darkness, looking for a hand to hold.
But we armchair social media psychologists would also like to believe that even those malicious folks, deep, 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 deep down, are also just trying to figure it out.
Oh, that's sweet of you. I like that. That's nice.
Well, I am Andy Swindler,
I agree.
and I am here today with Brendan to talk about the question, is sex sacred?
I like it. I like it, Andy. It's not, I don't know what I thought you were going to come up with as a topic for this episode, but it wasn't this. And I was excited that it was this because, as usual, it sent me going, okay. It sent me scrambling into the realm of accruing knowledge and what is it? Sort of pleasure chasing, dopamine chasing via my avenue of knowledge accrual.
Right on. Well, I appreciate that because I did not do a lot of homework for this episode, which is, sort of our usual vibe, but I look forward to learning what you've learned today. Um,
Yeah. Can I ask what was there something in your life and or perhaps our conversations or what got it boiling up for you is like, oh, this would be an interesting thing that I don't know for you. For a lot of times when I come up with things, it's not things I've either been wrestling with or talking about with other people, sometimes extensively, and I'm like, I should talk to Andy about this. Or sometimes it's like, you know what? That's something I've kind of like been backburnering in my brain that I
right.
think I would like the opportunity or the dead in some ways the deadline to take it seriously enough. But what bubbled it up for
Absolutely.
you?
Well, we were texting a little bit back and forth about this a week or two ago. I don't
Yeah,
actually remember the exact conversation, but um, some elements of this were coming up, and that in and of itself may have been an echo of a couple episodes ago when we talked about pornography.
yeah, yep,
And so, yeah, I think it's just been in the ether, and it's certainly a question I'm asking myself, I guess, for my whole life.
yeah.
I think I may have mentioned on that episode, when we got to college, I was pretty much the only one of us, I think, who had lost my virginity in high school. So, I've,
Oh yeah, like in our friend group.
yeah, um,
Yeah, you and Fabrice, maybe Fabrice. I think that's about it.
yeah. So I realized that I didn't expect to be the minority, if not the outcast, at that point in time. And so, for me, I mean, I lost it when I was 15. Even that phrase is kind of funny, isn't it? It's like I lost my virginity. So maybe that phrase itself is a pretty interesting
It
entry point
is. It
into
is interesting. Yeah.
like why do we frame it that way? And now that I, as became a stepfather 2 years ago, I have a 9-year-old stepdaughter, and so just even just witnessing sort of like she's starting to ask questions, right? I mean, like, and
Mm.
one of the things I'm, at least theoretically, I realize a lot of my parenting, I imagine a lot of people do this, whoever even think about parenting before their parents, like, there's a lot of like
Yes.
things you think are theoretically great ideas, and you get there and you're just like, oh, wait a minute, because they're really at the stages of development, and there really is the idea of
Yeah.
letting kids be kids as long as they can and all that.
Yes.
And I just think in this area in particular with sex, there, I don't know, I guess I just find myself wanting to be kind of just practical and matter of fact about it. It's like
Hmm.
it's this reality, and I wonder, like, I don't know. I sort of imagine kids that grow up on farms, get to understand the mechanics of all of this, earlier than within we city folks. And
Yeah.
the other day, she literally asked, like, how did cave people figure out how to have babies? I mean, she's only 9, so I don't think, I don't think anybody understands the mechanics of it at that age. But like, um, but even just asking, like, how did cave people figure out how to make babies?
Yeah.
To me, I mean, I think one of the first questions, some questions we're asking is like, well, what's the purpose of sex? Um,
Mm.
and I'm going to break that into at least two big categories, right? Pleasure and procreation. And I do find that when we generally, at least in my limited observations, talk to kids about sex, it's like we don't usually start with pleasure, maybe never mention it. And
Oh, interesting.
that to me is a curiosity because it's like, are we embarrassed to talk about the fact that it's pleasurable? Do we think that if they catch wind that it's pleasurable, that they'll be less responsible about it,
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
aka
Yeah.
less sacred? Um, my wife actually wrote something correlating sex with power, which was really beautiful.
Mm.
Um, so those are some opening volleys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it is fascinating. I don't, yeah, it's funny. I educated myself about sex before I ever spoke to adults about it. I was a library kid, meaning just like library is one of my favorite places to go. I grew up in a family that was spendthrifts. Um, so we didn't do a ton of things throughout my childhood that involved money. I feel like I'm raising my kids in a very different way, and not necessarily for the better, but just this is what I'm doing. So I spent a lot of time at the library, and I realized quite early on that like if you're just wandering around reading books, adults don't really aren't too concerned about what you're up to. They're like, "Oh, great, you're just reading. That's wonderful." And I was an early reader, whatever. I was reading pretty proficiently from quite an early age, and so I just would go to sections and be like, "Cool. What is sex? What is the clitoris?" So I think by the time I was 6, 7, or 8, I was already kind of like versed in the mechanics, and as much as like diagrams and uh, books about it could tell me. And then I eventually I think I was like 12 or 13, and I said a thing to my mom that I knew would prompt her to make the speech. I sort of like led her to it so then she could kind of tell me. And then never really had a conversation about it with my dad until I was in my late teens. And then it was very uh, definitely pleasure focused, but also kind of more whatever, I don't know, more ruminative and specific in terms of like the phrase, I think I might have said this in the show at one point, but the phrase digital clitoral stimulation was included in the conversation, which to me just kind of like that tells you a lot.
And that means something completely different now.
Yes, it totally does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That could be like an AI thing, in which case people are like, "What?" And then, but I didn't learn about it in school or whatever. My parents pulled me out because they were like, "I don't care what they're going to talk about," and I was like, "I don't need to know anything that they're going to tell me. I've read about it years ago. This is silly." And so, but yeah, a lot of it. I think the pleasure part is just almost not unnecessary, but like children find the pleasure zones located between their legs quite early. Typically, I'm assuming probably even, it might even happen in the womb. I don't know. Go check. But the idea that like those areas are pleasure zones is no surprise. I'm talking to many parents. They're like, oh yeah, there's times when I come into the tub and you're just kind of like, oh, all right, buddy. That's you time. Go ahead and whatever. Have fun exploring, but you just let me know when you're ready for the towel. And I don't think they mean it in that way. That was a double entendre, not intended to be. This whole conversation is going to be like that. So it's interesting to me. I've had to talk to my kids about sex already, just because they started asking enough questions that we're like, all right, let's do all the basics and kind of talk them through it. It was actually delightful and really fun and funny, as we kind of like led them to it and they kind of figured stuff out mechanically. Um, but I, as a Christian, am teaching about sex from a sacred angle. Although my initial vote is to say that sex is not certainly not explicit, not implicitly in and of itself sacred. I would reject that and say thumbs down. Um,
Well,
but
well, could you help us define sacred?
yes, so sacred is defined as connected with God or the gods, or dedicated to a religious purpose and so deserving veneration. Now, okay, we got to track that. What does religious mean? Thanks a lot, New Oxford American, for that definition and for this one. Religious, relating to or believing in a religion. Thanks a lot. That's a major fail as far as I'm concerned in terms of helping people. Religion, though, is defined as
Self-referential.
I know. I hate that. A lot of dictionaries do it too. The belief, so religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially, not distinctly, especially well, that would be distinctly, not exclusively, especially a god or gods. So for something to be sacred, God or gods have to be involved. So if anyone is a professing atheist, let's say, which the Bible in Romans 1 says don't exist, but all men know there is a God. Then, so for example, then to them, at least subjectively, all atheists, sex cannot be sacred unless we're engaging in the thing we've talked about here, where, or the thing you just sent about Trump, that here's the long con is when someone accepts a lie as truth. So then it says, oh, okay, well, sacred doesn't mean that then. Sacred means something else, and you lie, and everyone believes it, and you go along with it. So we have talked to them about sex, at least from the perspective of like um, what I'll get into later too. In trying to answer this question, what, as far as I can tell, is also the closest thing we have to like a scientific conclusion as to the sacredness of sex, because it's not entirely an an objectively demonstrable thing. It seems we might be stuck with something as impoverished as like consensus of experts, and the consensus of experts is that sex, at least there's a lot of dispute about it, but calling it sacred is probably not within the consensus, but it is sex within marriage is the sort of proper use or utility for this operation. And kind of the only play, I think Buddhism or Buddhism and Hinduism, I'll have to get to it when we get to it, sort of specifically says that like it is sacred, but it is only sacred within the bounds um, of marriage, of permanent covenant with another person, permanent promise. So I haven't taught my kids about it being sacred, but I have talked about it being a gift. That's kind of like pretty prototypical, like Christian sex education. Um, Kind of 101 is like it's a gift, but a sort of a powerful one. Oh, you are on mute, my
But
man.
implicitly a gift, like from God.
Yeah. That it's a gift like for creational creational recreational for the purposes of it's funny, this is echoes across all the as I examine this, like all religions or in what is it, Dharmaist religions, or Dharmic religions, is referred to as kama, or there's versions of that in different languages, but it's all that, which is sort of pleasure, which is one of the things that life is for. Although in the Buddhist sense, even more than the Hindu sense, you are supposed to kind of move farther and farther away from pursuing kama as like a if your goal, which your goal is to eventually ascend, that even sort of pleasure has to be released. But it is kind of one of the things that life is for.
Yeah. Huh. I thank you. Given those definitions, I will also go with no.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating because in the whatever we're in, post New Agey consciousness, something.
Yeah.
Like secular communities, I think sacred is thrown around a lot as probably just a way of saying healthy or maybe even righteous. Just like
Yeah. Yeah. Cultural appropriation, basically.
good, a really good way of doing business as a human. Um, and
Yeah.
connected with something that was often referred to as spirit. I think spirit is the most sort of universal term, they're universal and non-offensive term I've heard.
Yeah. But very specific to that subset of
Yeah,
which I looked up too, because I was like, oh, I'm surrounded by this some similar people to you, I think, in a lot of ways. And I looked up, gosh, what is it? Oh man, I didn't. All right, I'll find it. I looked up like the percentage of people who hold um to new age views to kind of get a sense of like, oh, what would that be in terms of consensus use, or like you're saying, like a
yeah.
universal terminology.
And I think in that sense, um, I lean more towards sex being seen as sacred, and I bet a lot of folks in that community would say it is, in the sense that it's a profoundly a profound act of human connection, which I mean is where
Yes.
my work focuses around the area of human connection. And what's interesting is I guess actually I hadn't thought about this, but it's quite adjacent. Yeah, you just made a comment about cultural appropriation, but it's at least adjacent to the idea that a lot of judgment and prescription seeps in. Like, well, sex can be sacred, but in order for it to be sacred, then, you know, you have to like give each other like hour-long massages and then, like whatever. Like there's a certain way of
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's just a random example I'm making up, but
I mean,
you
it sounds nice,
imagine
but
it does sound nice actually. But you
yeah.
imagine where it's like, oh, well, if you're just whatever, like maybe just time is the simplest thing to look at. Like if it's just done quickly, and just done to the pursuit of orgasm, then that's not sacred. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
embodying the fullness of the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. As near as I can tell, there is something related to or akin to the sacred involved in sex. Like it's a there's a there's edging. It edges close to in some ways, and then that's what I see too in my, again, I have a lot of friends, and okay, so 10%, somewhere around 10% of Americans have participated in one of several new age spiritual movements. So 10% of the US, which is a notable percentage. I would say worldwide, it's it's infinitesimal. I don't know if it's smaller than Judaism. You know how small Judaism, by the way, is? Oh my gosh, when I did this, I was like, oh, I should factor in like what Jews say about sex. And then I was like, oh, Judaism is 0.183% of the world population. Isn't that fascinating?
183.
0.183. Now, in the US, it's obviously like a different percentage here, but like um it's still minute. So I was like, oh my gosh, so Jews could hold this, like modern Judaism could hold this position that's like radically in one way, but it's inconsequential to consensus of spiritual. This is the way I look at it, at least. If I'm going to step out and be a humanist, then like, okay, I have to look at religious texts and practitioners as sort of scientific text and scientific practitioners, right? It's the closest thing we have in terms of like, if you're just going to view it from like a step out and kind of be objective or whatever. Now I have my subjective experience, which alters objective reality um, fundamentally, as like having experienced Christ. So it's different for me, but I do try to always step out and be like humanist about it. So then what I see with the idea of like introducing this idea of things being sacred, and I remember this from that movie Waking Life. Someone's like, everything's sacred. Every moment is sacred, like right now. Or holy. He was like, holy. Everything's holy. Like right now, holy, holy, look, holy, 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 always, always holy. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But that's also just, again, that is literal cultural appropriation. And it's doing the Trump like sell a lie until someone believes it. And if you can get everyone to repeat the lie, then you have this bond. But I was like, it's an attempt to make that which is defiantly, in some ways, non-religious, fundamentally religious, which is, to me as a wildly religious person, I find so strange. And I was like, wait, so you're just, but it also to me suggests that we are religious by nature, human beings. I mean, statistics point to that we are like the majority of the earth is religious. Almost every indigenous culture, almost all that someone has approached and colonized right through that cultural appropriation vehicle
Wired, we're
has had a
wired for
religion.
belonging and meaning. So
Yeah,
that
and
would
it, yeah,
naturally, I think, lead
yeah,
to
yeah.
all forms of religion.
Yeah, and transcendent, and specifically transcendent meaning, which means beyond. So this is the problem when you reject transcendence and then try. So then basically what you're doing is, I mean, again, in some ways, like, and I see that against in the New Age community. Uh, but this is the weird thing about the New Age community. So let's address that because I think this is they're the great fulcrum here. Now we live in a majority Christian world. We live in a majority Christian culture, sort of, in the US. We live in a majority Abrahamic religion world and culture as well. All of us, ultimately, like in terms of the world itself. Now, depending on what country you live in, it can be dominantly Dharmaic or whatever. How is it? Dharmic religions. So Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, even Taoism, sort of, whatever is similar. Um, so you can have, obviously live in cultures that are different, but in terms of just looking at the whole human family as a whole, which I do like to do as often as possible, so as to invite community. New Age is interesting to me because, and tell me, correct me if you've had a different impression. When I sort of first was exposed to New Age, which I feel like is the dominant cultural religion of Los Angeles, where I lived, it's sort of like the Bible Belt, where people are just like, "Oh, I'm a Christian." They're not a Christian, but there's Christians all over the place. They're kind of like culturally Christian, which is pretty much bullshit. Um, but
If we cover that in a Christmas episode.
Yes, exactly. So then, like, yeah, so it's culturally New Age. But I was like, to me, New Age always seemed like kind of a sampler plate of like, where do all the like almost like Baha'i, right? Kind of Baha'ish. Where like, what are all the religions saying? You know what I mean? Again, like, what's the kind of consensus? And then let's kind of strip away all this other stuff, man. Let's like get rid of all this judgment. Now, nobody gets rid of judgment, right? Because I would say, like, even in the New Age community, sex without consent is considered unsacred, right? Is considered inappropriate sex, and that's the same across like religious schemas as well, formally. Um, but so there's no absenting judgment. Like we try, I think there's amongst like professed secularists, there's an attempt to make it so, but no one does it. So it's weird to me that someone's trying to. In some ways, it's trying to like do the impossible. But anyway, that was my thought about New Age. But the more I explored it, I was like, sex is the one place where I think the New Age, New Thought movement is the weirdest. Like, it makes no rational sense. Because, and this is how I've described Burning Man too. It was like, where the whole burning community, like, where it's like, I want this. I want to be like a child again. I want to have all that innocence in some ways, right? I want to have not lost it. I want to have this like play and joy and even Peter Pan-ness, right? And just like, we just want to explore all the things that are good, but I also want to be able to bang whoever I want, whatever I want all the time. Like pretty much, I was like, is that pretty much what New Age is? Oh, but again, I thought it was consensus. So to me, that was sort of disruptive, or kind of like, this is kind of what everyone's basically saying, man. Did you have that impression when you kind of first encountered the New Age, New Thought premises?
Yeah, I'm not immersed in that many communities, or actually, this is fascinating. I mean, I would say I have a lot of connections with that, and we would typically maybe say more consciousness, I guess, but I think it's all in the same orbit. Um, but it's almost entirely been on Zoom. I'm
Oh,
not
interesting.
very, very tiny authentic relating community in Chicago that kind of counts. I don't, it's funny, I just realized the other day, like, even the Unitarians are too woke for me at this point. So I'm kind of like, I'm like,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of tinkering with,
Unitarians are New Age. Like
yeah, yeah,
that's not
pretty
a,
much. So I'm
that's
kind of
like
like tinkering with the idea of a church and or some kind of, you know, dare I say, religious community.
yeah.
And I didn't grow up in one, so I'm sort of in this exploratory field. There's one closer
Yeah.
to us. It's confusing here, Park, because there's the Unity Temple, famously
Mm.
designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, that is the
Oh, cool.
Unitarian Church, and then there's just this other community center just called like Unity, like
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not really associated, I don't think, with anything. It's just, but it seems fairly similar. Um, and then it's funny. There's a black church 3 doors down, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go there.
It's close. Proximity is a major draw for a lot of people. Let's
Proximity
be
is
honest.
meaningful, and man, I've been to some black churches. They seem to have more fun than most people. So,
Yeah,
um,
they do.
none of
Most.
the it's less stuffy connections to God, which I'm into.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I hadn't really thought much about it in this context, but to the extent that what you're saying is there, I don't know how much I've experienced it because, for better or worse, I do think the sexuality is vastly reduced on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
We've talked
Yeah.
pheromones come up surprisingly often in our conversations. I think just because
Yeah.
we talk a lot about human nature and human connection
Yeah. Yeah.
and just the nature of, I don't know, that even came up in the trans discussions, right? Just what's the nature of, multiple
Hmm.
things. But uh yeah, I don't, you might think somebody's like hot on Zoom, but the chances
Yeah.
that they're gonna act on that or maybe even be in an extended interaction with them is pretty limited, pretty low.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, long answer, and I'm like, huh, I don't know, but I don't know if this came up in your research, but way too many stories about well, look, like let's face it, I think at least anecdotally, stories of I don't know, I'm assuming mostly men engaging in not only non-consensual sex, but like pretty egregious abuse of power related to sex
Hmm. Yes.
certainly is common amongst New Age consciousness, cult leaders, whatever, that whole universe. Also
Yeah.
seemingly common amongst various branches of Christianity. So
Oh
uh,
yeah.
that's
Yeah. There's not a religion on the planet that has not been that someone hasn't weaponized in order to have sex with somebody.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the thing is, what's interesting. So yes, maybe that's a misapprehension of mine because I obviously come into my cohort of progressives through the West Coast, and it is maybe more it is dominantly or openly New Age, New Thought, and then so to me, I think you'd be more revealed, even less so than interpersonal like Congress and sort of like what people, especially in the virtual world, like what people share about, especially as about sex. And so my assumption generally is I would say anybody who's in the progressive cohort would my assumption would be that they would be culturally new age, new thought. So they would refer to things like the sacredness of sex, which is absented, uh, which is absented any like religious framework, even though itself it is a religious framework. You know what I mean? If that
Well,
makes sense.
it's interesting. Like, here's an example. I mean, I actually am a co-host of something called the Gathering for Change Agents, which I would not criticize anybody for labeling as maybe new agey.
Mhm.
But it's cool. It's a really cool gathering. We just explore, various aspects of personal growth and development. And
Yeah.
I think I've told this story before. I mean, it was like sex didn't exist in our house. I mean, it was
Oh, okay.
kind of
Yeah.
weird. And yeah, I was like you said, I was one of those kids who discovered myself pretty early. And the talk consisted of, my parents, bless their hearts, like they were so good on so many fronts, but this was one for whatever reason they just didn't necessarily want to touch. And
Yeah.
probably because my mom actually did suffer sexual abuse and has been public about that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the talk consisted of something like, "Hey, I have an older brother," and it was like, "Do boys know what a condom is?" I'm like, yeah, okay, done. I mean, really, that was about it.
Yeah.
And then it's like even if like we're watching a movie and some a sex scene comes on, like you could just feel like all the air get sucked out of the room and just sort of like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stop breathing for a little while. And it was just like it didn't exist. And
Mm.
I saw no evidence whatsoever other than my brother and I that my parents ever had sex. And
Yes, there's some proof.
um which leads me back to the hierarchy of pleasure before procreation, because just
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
mathematically, like, well, we don't need that much sex to procreate. Um, Although now that I've been in that cycle in my new marriage, I realize actually, yes, it actually does take statistically more than I imagined. It only takes one
Yeah.
success, but like many,
Yes.
I'm in
Yes,
sales, so I
exactly.
get it. It's kind of like sales. It's like, you got to take a lot of
Yes.
no's before you get to that yes.
Absolutely.
but
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, see, that's so fascinating because I think we've talked about this before, but I remember being shocked because I felt like, I don't know, your dad was an academic, he was like a philosophy professor. So I was like, oh, I was like, your sex talk was probably like 4 hours long and like fast, like literally drawing on probably psychological and philosophical. I was like, it's honestly, and this is, I don't mean this as any cruelty. I was like, your sex talk was probably long and honestly, ultimately, and like wildly enlightening, but probably boring to like a teenager. You know what I mean? Like if now as that person, I'd be like, I was like, you got the best sex talk ever. So it's fascinating that it was just like, don't impregnate anybody. Do you know how to not have a you know how to not have a baby?
right.
Well, this
This is the highest risk quotient for you as a boy. That's the thing you need to.
yeah,
Which
right.
I
Which
think
is
is. Did you watch?
fascinating.
Oh my God, what's that show? Uh, with the sex monster. It's
Oh, the like the horny teenager thing on Netflix
yes, yes.
with John Mulaney
Yeah,
and
yeah, totally. What's it called? Anyway, I
that
should.
one.
Um, you know, I think it's even just in the opening sequence to that show, they just, talk about how sex, for boys is like Mardi Gras and sex for girls is like this like entangled series of painful tubes or I don't know, something like that.
Oh, funny, funny, funny. Big Mouth is the name of the show.
Big Mouth, thank you, thank you. Yeah,
Yep. Oh,
a
there's a
funny show.
spin-off too, I think, about the like horny monsters called Human Resources.
Yeah, in the workplace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Workplace comedy.
Good show, at least in the beginning. I didn't carry on, but funny show. And uh, it's one of the things it explores, I think, is that's great is the parent-child relationship. And then there's this
Hmm.
it's not like the main set of parents, but it's like one of the friends. Their parents are like super kind of hippie, like sex positive, like,
Yep.
almost like Kinsey level, like, oh, let's just talk about sex at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wonder. I don't that I think is more of like my natural philosophy, like
Hmm.
because I also just my even beyond sex is just I really believe like normalizing things makes them less enticing. I mean, I was literally having a conversation with my stepdaughter this week about like, gee, isn't it interesting when people tell you not to do things, they're more interesting to do? I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's human nature for some reason.
Yep. Pretty powerful. Pretty powerful stuff. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, that's fascinating. Yeah, we're at the phase now. Our kids are 9 and 11, and they never forget. They are in the phase where they like are constantly curious, like when and if we've had sex, and then but they're also, and this makes me sad because I wasn't like this as a kid, and I always thought it was lame when kids are like this. So in some ways, I have to struggle with thinking my kids are lame. But like when we express affection or even like grabby affection, like booty grabbing affection, kissing and booty grabbing kind of thing, they are kind of like, ew, I hate that, man. I'm gonna say it right
Oh,
now. I
big
hate it.
ooze to kisses here. We don't do the
Yeah,
booty grabbing because I don't
yeah,
think my wife wants to do that in front of her. That's interesting. But yeah, kisses are and it almost like a comical ooh though and over the top like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
an
It's there.
improv act we go into.
I guess, yeah, but it's like a weird, to me, that's like a cultural thing that I don't get and I don't understand. And again, I was raised in like fundamentalist Christian communities. I don't understand the like, ew, to physical affection or sex or whatever. Or the other day we had sex and the girl said like, somehow, I don't know why, I came in partway through the conversation and they had asked if we had or something. And then it was like, oh yeah, we had like earlier today. And they were like, what? And they were like, I don't want a sister or whatever. They like they were worried about the procreative aspects or whatever. But yeah, it was interesting. So like I had at least, it's so funny. I would have thought, I thought you had hours long sex conversations as a kid. And then I had like I guess, relatively speaking, I had like because I was raised by like, I lived with my mom. My mom's, and my stepdad, but, had an antagonistic relationship with my stepdad. So he doesn't factor in as much throughout my childhood in terms of like messages received, because I blocked them. But my mom, was a Christian, born again Christian, was born again when I was like in her womb, and then my dad is professed atheist, and antagonistic towards religion, pretty to this day, and always throughout my whole life. So then I had a sex talk from kind of both perspectives, um, and my dad's was probably similar to the end of um, Captain Fantastic. Have you ever seen that movie with Viggo Mortensen? Love that movie. Where he's like, when you make love to a woman, be gentle, pay attention. That it was like it was more in that mode of like sex is like something don't be basically don't be a selfish lover was kind of probably the dominant ethos.
And that's a good way to look back to that one definition of like quote unquote sacred being really about human connection and non-selfishness. Yeah, and giving.
Yeah, which is wrong, but that's wrong. I mean, that's literally incorrect.
I
You
get
know
it.
what I mean? Yeah, but isn't that fascinating though? But I was like, so then that's to me, I was like, then we have to examine that. Like, why does that keep coming up in spaces where they're using it incorrectly? You know what I mean? Why are you stealing something, let's say from the indigenous, right? You're stealing an indigenous concept, using it completely incorrectly, and then being like, no, that's what it really means. That's fascinating. Even though it can be demonstrably shown that you're not you're not dealing honestly. So then why do people feel the need? This is fascinating, right? In all communities to not deal honestly about sex. It makes it fascinating. So
Well,
there's something third rail about sex in and of itself, which I think
maybe
all people have to be like, why do we why in some ways, as a practical sense, as a kid, George's great question, right? Which is like, what caveman? Like, how did a caveman figure this out? Like, can we get back to like, when did we first start thinking about this as a thing beyond a thing?
well, that's
You know what I
it.
mean?
I wanted to be able to answer her, and I'm
Yeah,
conservative because I have to like play by the rules that others have created, so to speak. For the most part, I'm kind of inventing some of my own, but this is a big enough area where I'm not going to like rock the boat too much. But I wanted to be able to answer and say, well, because it feels good.
yeah,
It really is that simple. Like everybody figures it out.
yes,
I mean,
yes.
unless you got some very unfortunate trauma, it's like you're gonna figure it out.
Yeah, and again, I explored my sexuality early too, like in kindergarten. Um, there was a girl who wanted us to put things in her vagina. So we would like, I remember like, clothespins, the wooden ones. This is actually kind of dangerous, having just had a splinter in my butt cheek. But it wasn't splintery at least. And so like, she was like, oh, you can put that in there. And so like, we pushed like one half. I think it was me and some other person there at the time. And she was like, she wanted us to like push that into her vagina, just the side it was like a broken one. So it was the side without the metal on it. And so like, I put things in girls' vaginas, and there was a girl who wanted to go in the closet and like she wanted to like take my penis out and touch it. And so I was like, we were exploring, and we were like, she liked how that felt. I liked how that felt. It felt something like there was already something we were like, I think this is a little secret.
Right,
So we were doing places where people weren't, even though no one had told me. No one had told us this. No one had ever said like gross or dirty, or that touching my penis was dirty or whatever. It's my penis. I can do what I want. You know what I mean? Ultimately. So then, but we but from early on, it was like, oh, those things feel good. And I've watched it less. I haven't seen it with my kids, but I saw it with my sister, who's on the spectrum. So she's a little less, I would say, regulated naturally, socially, in terms of those energies you're talking about, like during a sex scene in a movie, which my parents growing up with, my dad wouldn't ever do anything. He took me out of one movie, and I realized that there's weird sex. Gosh, what was it called? I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, there's a scene in it where this guy, a brother and a sister are hanging out, and the sister wants cocaine. I thought it was Coca-Cola at the time. That's how young I was. And he was like, "I'll give you Coke if you blow me." So then his sister starts giving him a blowjob, and then he's sort of like leaning back in the chair and enjoying it, and then visualizing himself as like a Nazi brown shirt. And my dad was like, I think we should go. Like that for him crossed the line. That's why I found out like what my dad's sexual taboos were, which is incest and Nazi ideation, and especially incest for the purposes of accruing drugs. So that's like those are my dad's limits. Whereas my mom would like fast forward past things once it started getting like
yeah.
grabby or shirt pully. If a shirt was pulled off, my mom would be like blip 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 blip. And I've done that with my kids. We watched Arcane, which your brother recommended
Oh yeah.
to me. It's flipping great show. And I full on one scene. I was like, I'm gonna fast forward past this. I was like, you don't even need to watch people having sex at your age. I don't think personally. And so for me, that was my boundary. That I was like,
Right.
oh, because again, I consider it it's set apart. So it is not explicitly like it's no more sacred than anything you're doing in obedience to God. In which case, one could then be like, oh, well, that's all. Everything you do in obedience to God is sacred. Maybe, sure. I don't know. That's a long argument. But uh, and this is and hopefully this helps people too. I've heard that people protest this. The reason I restrict the viewing of sex more for my children than violence is because of the simplicity and complexity of explaining those things. And you know this now, having a kid, that there are some degrees of complexity. You think, well, kids are as sophisticated as anybody. They can understand anything. No, they can't. I mean, some kids can't, and maybe they're highly intelligent, good at processing things. No, you will confuse the crap out of some kids getting too complicated. I've used it as a tactic. I've gotten very specific about things, and my kids get bored and they don't want to hear it. So
Right.
violence is so simple. It's so simple. You see someone in a movie shooting a bunch of people, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, how do you let that? Why do you regulate? You hate sex. You're not sex positive. You won't let kids watch a sex scene, but you can watch them shooting a bunch of people to death." You know how easy it is to explain that to a kid? Hey, can I shoot people to death? No. Unless people are trying to shoot you to death or people around you to death, don't even consider, please, shooting anyone to death in real life. Can I have sex like that? Well, yes, you can. Okay, there are proper contexts wherein, okay, it's especially as a woman, it's very easily be manipulated by social pressures as well. Okay, it's you have to if you're going to be a reasonable person. Sex is way more complicated than violence. And I think sex can be a form of violence. And maybe I think I have a theory that is sex always violent? I think to some degree, yes. There's something explicitly violent about sex, and I think that's something why human beings enjoy it. Um, but yeah, man, the kid, it's funny we're coming around to the kid thing because it was like it is fascinating just in terms about sex in and of itself, and the complexities therein.
Yeah, and a couple things come up. One is, again, that it's like we're turning the kaleidoscope around the word sacred itself, and
Yeah.
much to your chagrins. And you know, bring any act, particularly perhaps with another person, that brings me closer to God or spirit. Could be
Mm.
could be another way that broader, sort of new age universe looks at it.
Yeah, well, I think, and that is an assemblage of other religions, meaning there are ways in which you can have sex that bring you far. That's almost like a dharmic thing, I guess, that bring you closer to enlightenment, and there are ways to have sex that bring you farther away. So
Right.
literally send you the opposite. So sex in and of itself, again, throughout the consensus, let me just briefly touch on it. Looking at Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, which gets us way past consensus percentages. Um, Premarital sex is viewed as sin, so that would be that which either places blockages between you and God and or enlightenment, or prevents your ability to reincarnate. Properly, gives you bad karma, etc. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Baha'i, Sikhism, Taoism, or Taoism, depending on how you like to pronounce that. I like Tao because it has a T, but I think it's more pronounced Taoism. So pretty much the consensus is premarital or extramarital sex is that which is not sacred. It cannot ever be sacred. In fact, it's the opposite, and it's even more than profane. Like sacred and the profane is kind of the contrast we've grown up with in our culture in English. Um, it's beyond profane, and that it's like sort of anti-sacred. It is opposed to sacredness, and it's sort of antagonistic. It hates sacredness. So this is the fascinating thing about New Age, where it says that which everyone has concluded in a consensus sense, meaning everyone, not in an absolute sense, they reject. Like New Age rejects what the Abrahamic and Dharmic religions have all encompassed. And I don't know. It's funny. I tried to explore like, let's look at indigenous religions, even though it's irrelevant to consensus, or like to try to understand this as a humanist. But there was an episode of 1923. It's one of the like Yellowstone spinoffs, and they were talking Lakota, I believe. Lakota, I could be wrong. Anyway, they were talking, the father and a daughter were talking about this like man who was this younger man around the daughter's age, that they were like, oh, are you interested? Like, do you want to bond? Essentially, do you want to marry, a different word, but do you want to marry this guy? And she was like, yeah, I do. And then and then they were kind of talking about sex a little bit. And he's like, well, You know, the elders say you're supposed to wait till after the ceremony. And she was like, did you wait till after the ceremony? And he was like, no one waits till after the ceremony. So I was like, oh, okay. Now, again, this is just flicking television, right? I haven't really found any validation for it. And actually, everything I research on it is so opaque and difficult to understand. So I don't know. But I was like, oh, there is something to this in the human experience that says sex is powerful.
Hmm.
And there's something that sex that requires uh, a sort of an entrance, it requires an entrance fee. And the entrance fee is like, especially for a woman, like, but really for everybody, because again, the consequences of STDs and birth and that sort of thing are certainly substantial, but the dangers are not birth. The dangers are much more akin to moral, ethical, spiritual, psychological, and what it does to you to then engage with that which the consensus of those appraising that which is moral and immoral have said is immoral. So the more you engage in that which is immoral, the more you and yourself are in danger of corruption. Or if the goal is to be connected to spirit, that all you have done is says "fuck you, spirit" throughout your whole life. So that's even more. There's no condom for that.
For some reason that's reminding me of another French phrase, "le petit mort,"
Yes, I love that phrase.
the little death. And in a very quick, I'm sure I'm overlying on Google's AI overview, but here we are. So I had always thought that to be associated with the vital signs, like being the closest to death,
Oh, interesting.
the moment of orgasm. But this doesn't mention that at all. It actually speaks more to like the feeling of brief loss or weakening of consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah, that's heavy in Taoism, specifically, especially related to men, that men experience loss. Women don't, but men experience loss, energy, chi loss. Men experience chi loss through sex. So sex is way more damaging to men from an energetic perspective.
Well, so let's talk about that. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about orgasm. And I think in some Eastern traditions, maybe Chinese medicine, I've even heard recommendations that as men age, they should orgasm, less and less and less frequently, uh,
Yeah.
which I reject. But I think we hinted at it earlier, but there's like a sense of if you're just chasing the orgasm, you're missing, other aspects of
Oh,
pleasure,
interesting.
connection, maybe even what some people will call sacredness. Um,
Yeah, no, they believe Taoists believe, as far as near as I could tell, this research this past week is like, no, there's energies created, and then it's actually like bisex, insects, and then the woman, it's kind of yin and yangy, but like there's an energy, woman creates an energy, and the man actually is like vampirically drawing this energy off of her, but it's meant to be kind of mutual. The woman is drawing the energy off of the man, and the man's drawing energy off of the woman. But there's also literally in the specific fluid itself is contained like a vital essence. So in semen, so then in semen, now the goal then therefore the thing you're talking about was just attention is it's I mean not attention, it really be almost speaks more to practically in some ways to stamina, but like the more energy or really but it isn't, it's invoking energy and then stealing it. So you're trying to invoke energy in the woman, steal the energy for yourself, give her as much energy as you can give her, because you're trying to compensate for the energy loss you're going to experience in orgasm. So they do semen retention. I got into this when I was like 10 or 11, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, when I was like exploring masturbation. And I read this article in Variety about how these high powered movie executives were retaining their semen in this Taoist sense. And so you can press on your perineum before you like prior to
right.
orgasm. And then
Very strange sensation.
it is weird. And so I did that. I did that for at least a summer. Um, and then they're like, oh, so then it sort of travels back. Now, of course, none of this is accurate, but in terms of the actual semen, that the semen then travels, that energy at least travels back up towards your brain. But then some Taoists argued about it and they're like, oh yeah, but that could produce madness. And then the others are like, no, this is how you maintain your energy. And then it gets into just people quibbling about awesome conversations that you wish you could be a part of.
Well, nevertheless, I know we both experimented with um, whatever, no FAP, just abstaining from orgasm for an extended
Yeah.
period of time. And I absolutely had more energy during that period.
Yes. Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
really, like so that's there's something there. Um, and I don't know. We talk a lot about the patriarchy. It comes up a lot anyway. And one of my theories for why the patriarchy exists is I do believe nature gave women more power. I mean, they incubate our offspring. Just
Yeah.
that's like one of the greatest powers. And it's funny. Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day posted, and in it there was a photo of a ovum, with all the sperm around, and
Mm.
it's like there's like this new research that's come out that defeats the male fantasy, as he said, that it's like the survival of the fittest, like the strongest sperm like wins the race and all that. And he's like,
Yeah.
actually, there's all these chemical interactions happening, and the female is choosing the sperm that it wants, and actually, all the putting out all these chemicals to discourage or even kill the ones that it doesn't want. And then once it chooses one, it literally sends out a chemical that decapitates all the others, all the other sperm. So it's like, yeah, I should probably, fact check that. But it's Neil. Come on.
Yeah.
Um,
He's only wrong about 50%.
yeah. But I was just like, okay, well, this validates the fundamental fear of being sent to the sperm mines that, resulted in men taking over everything. So, that's
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of it is about sexual vulnerability as well, which means, like, in some ways, just practically speaking, the women and children first concept is the patriarchy. The patriarchy says men are expendable, therefore they have to lead in terms of war, foraying into other areas. They also have to lead in terms of circling the wagons. Like men are supposed to be on the outside because women are, especially in state of pregnancy or in child rearing, are in a state of vulnerability. And so that's how we've been designed, that essentially that men are more expendable. So that the patriot
mathematically,
the,
we need more women than men to repopulate, right? Yeah.
yes, exactly. Right. So that's where China made their like hilarious mistake. Because of I mean, in some ways that's a toxic patriarchy. Of course, but this is because we'll do an episode on that too. I am pro patriarchy. And to me, it's like masculine, like saying you're down with patriarchy is like down with masculinity or down with femininity. It doesn't really make any sense, because it's fundamental to who we are. And it's a protective instinct where it's like, again, in that power is vulnerability, and women are vulnerable and of course, this is the funny thing is the people who say smash the patriarchy are also like, you can't keep women, if women don't want to be pregnant anymore, you can't, because that's a harm and that's a drain, and the fetus is a parasite and all this sort of stuff. So in some ways, I don't think anyone who even says smash the patriarchy believes in it. I think I don't think they have thought it through in any way, shape, or form. And I think what they've done is taken the patriarchy, just like people have taken sacred, and just invented a whole new thing for what patriarchy means. Where patriarchy just means father rule, or like a male dominated society. Now, in some way, can that be toxic? Absolutely. You know,
Well,
it's
let's definitely do that as its own episode.
I think so.
That
Yeah.
comes up quite a bit, and I'm almost shocked that we haven't yet. One area I wanted to at least dip into,
Yeah.
polyamory,
Yeah.
and this sort of takes us a little bit back to the idea of marriage between two people and its connection to sex. And I think some people,
Yeah.
well, you talked about sort of premarital sex and as being a sin in a lot of religions.
Nearly all. I would say
Nearly
literally
all. So
all.
let's
Yeah.
just say
Yeah.
like that's
All.
the
Yeah.
consensus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's how you
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you know, and then of course there's in that category of premarital or just non-marital people who never get married is,
Yeah.
I don't know, let's just call them sluts. Like, which I don't say is a bad word. I love the people who are like bringing back the word slut. I'm like,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I remember that was in 2000 or something. Some book called The Ethical Slut. And that was like around the time I first started hearing that slut shaming
Yeah.
term
So
and that
that,
sort of
which
thing.
is different, of course. Slut being somebody who just likes to have sex and is pretty open about it, and which is very different from, polyamory, which would be, people who are in multiple committed partnerships. So having sex with more than, and then sorry, this is like a shortcut. It's way more than sex. It's a fully committed partnership. But for the context of this episode, we are here talking about that.
Sometimes, well, some people who actually get married in a poly. I mean, I don't know about you. Most of the poly people I know, and I probably know maybe less than a dozen, none of them are married.
Yeah,
They're all
yeah. I didn't mean to. If I said marriage, I misspoke. I meant committed. I do feel like it's got commitment though, of some
Oh,
kind.
like a temporary commitment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You think it's usually temporary?
At least all the people I know, yeah, yeah, it's temporary. It is temporary.
Or
I
do you
mean,
have
that
a
is.
primary?
I mean, in some ways, that's really. That's not quite the entire definition of marriage, but that would be the like would be a permanent commitment. You know what I mean? Like, what else?
Well, okay,
What?
so
You know what I mean?
polygamous would be multiple marriage, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which is also forbidden in the majority of religions, although in Hinduism, speaking of patriarchy, in Hinduism, there's some texts that suggest that essentially those who are the highest on the rung, the Brahmins, etc., the Brahmins get to marry a bunch of people. Nobody else does.
Got
Which
it.
to me, I was like, I don't trust that. But I'm in an egalitarian religion, so I was like,
Yeah, so maybe we don't need to spend too much time here, but also somewhat limited, but maybe a similar-ish, maybe fewer number of friends who are polyamorous. So
yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, I guess in my experience, they have, one or at least one or two. What makes it poly is going from one to two at least, and
yes, yeah, yeah.
committed partners, and then maybe beyond that, there's the openness, to more, and then usually I think there's a transparency about it, in terms of like just communicating.
Yes.
It's funny. I
Yeah.
guess I perceived it to be more committed than apparently you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean it could be committed in the same way like a premarital or non-marital monogamous relationship would be, which is a commitment, but it's not um again, I think we are ceremonial. Oh, your friend Brandon is totally into this. We're ceremonial creatures. We're religious creatures. We're ceremonial creatures. I don't think anyone, and people who pretend to divorce themselves from that, just like you could pretend to divorce yourself from the sexual binary or whatever, that sort of thing. You can feign it. Um, but I do, again, the patterns of commitment across, again, universal, all cultures, the whole globe, every place we discover and uncover, that the consensus is that people do pair up in an extended fashion, and there are marriage rituals that vary in tone and timbre, of course, but that marriage is a fundamental building block of the majority. Not, I mean, literally, the like statistical all societies. So then, and remember, even like before, like same-sex couples couldn't get married. They would engage in civil unions, but they would have commitment ceremonies. So meaning they would be like, "This is us. We're 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 committed." Whereas people just saying they're committed can certainly be, you could see it out in action. But again, I think that some part of us craves evidence or uh, whatever, and we still do it in a secular society now. If you like it, then you got to put a ring on it. There you go. Bam.
Um, so we've dabbled in these a tad, but to maybe bring it home to and I'm curious what's still on your list, but pleasure and power. I'm coming back to, maybe intertwined in some ways. But my question that's emerged about pleasure is, is it guilty in general?
Oh, is pleasure guilty? Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Pleasure as
Well,
a cultural, like, I
yeah.
don't know, eating chocolate, whatever.
Yeah. Some people do that. I don't know where that comes from. It's not a religious thing. I mean, this is a funny thing. Of course, I've grown up like in a Christian community, which I had plenty of problems with. And then as a Christian myself well, I committed at 8, but God changed me and I was born again at 12. So God did that business. And then so living that life, and I've certainly explored living differently than how God told me to in a myriad of ways. I've always found it fascinating that people are like, kind of create religion as being not sex positive, which is categorically false. And it's a weird impression. I don't really know where it comes from because sex is biblically celebrated. So that takes care of all the Abrahamic religions. Sex positive, absolutely. All they've done is put up different boundaries than the people who accuse religion of not being sex positive. So they've said, so for, like a non-religious or an anti-religious person would say like consent. Like this is my theory that essentially the secular mind is left with consent is everything. Like literally consent is, it could almost be the definitional sexual ethic of a non-religious person who sex cannot be sacred for. So they can say it, but they're lying. Lying to themselves, lying to other people. Like it's not true. So, but can sex be done like in terms of ethically? Like we observed, ethics are subjective or malleable. Like the Nazis lived according to a Nazi ethic. So you can do ethical. So in doing ethical, to me, that seems like the only consensus is consent, and that's their boundary. But that's a boundary, and so all religions, consensus wise, have established the boundary being marriage. In which case, there are extensive texts, teachings, etc. Go go nuts. Now there are a bunch of religions who are like, no, you can't put your penis in the butthole. Whatever. You have to be careful with how much semen you issue. There's that sort of stuff. Absolutely,
Oh, that's how the
absolutely,
kids are
absolutely.
hacking it, I think, by the way, right? Or
Yes,
the,
that was a. Listen. It was one of those things where I was like, I don't know how many people were doing it, but it was such a big. It was so hilarious. Ultimately, I mean, sometimes it's really sad, but it was so hilarious that like so many sketches and comedy things were made about it that I was like, I assumed at the time I was like, oh, this is a widespread phenomenon. This is the butthole loophole. But anyway, there are some religious texts that speak to that or whatever. But ultimately, like the Bible is super sex positive. So the idea of like the church now, do crummy Christians change it? Like make cultural mores that are stupid? I'm sure people do things poorly all the time. This is why text is more important than cultural practice because people do things poorly all the time. People have used the Bible to justify polygamy because you're like, well, look, David had many wives and Solomon had many wives and Abraham had multiple. And you're like, the Bible's full of people doing effed up ish. So like the Bible's full of people being like raping people too. That doesn't mean it's like, oh, that's good. It's literally, I mean, in a lot of cases, the Bible is literally like a historical compendium of how God's people did the wrong thing all the time and he kept forgiving them. And that's a huge part of it.
right.
But Christianity is sex positive. Islam is sex positive. Hinduism sex positive. Buddhism is sex positive. And Buddhists, listen, Buddha said I love bringing this up because I always think people think or like Buddhism's like it's kind of what it, kind of they bring it into the new age, and so even people who are claim to be practicing Buddhists do this, and they can justify this by this sort of subjective like we all understand the sort of sacred Buddha. But Buddha said this to priests. This is actually one of the first times that Buddha issued like a tenant. I think there was over like 200 tenants that he eventually issued because before it was kind of more Hinduism essentially is like here's my angle on Hinduism. So, but a priest had gone and had sex with, I think, with his actual wife. But Buddha was like, if you want to gain enlightenment, sex can't be part of it. So Buddhism in many ways is one of the least sex positive religions on the planet, y'all. And I'm quoting Buddha right here, okay? Worthless man, it would be better that your penis be stuck into the mouth of a poisonous snake than into a woman's vagina. It would be better that your penis be stuck into the mouth of a black viper than into a woman's vagina. It would be better that your penis be stuck into a pit of burning embers, blazing and glowing, than into a woman's vagina. Why is that? For that reason, you would undergo death or death like suffering, but you would not, on that account, at the breakup of the body after death, fall into deprivation, the bad destination, the abyss, hell.
Well,
Now I love that because every time I want to basically, I should just do a printout and laminate them. And every time I see like a Buddha statue at like a restaurant or like in a yoga studio, Andy, I've wanted to do this for years as like a bit of like political theater. Like just leave that card there of just like my favorite Buddha quote. Dude, that's literal Buddha. That's the enlightened one. And I got to tell you, that is not. I would say that I would agree is a religion that is not sex positive. So let's just be real about it. Everyone else is like literally once you're married, have sex this way, do it this way, flip it. Like if you want to do it fast, and the cool thing. This is the thing I love. I'm going to always pick up Christianity because I'm a Christian. The cool thing about Christianity is Paul's very specific about it. Jesus made sexual sin more intense than it was in the practical Jewish religion, where he said that even if one is to look at a woman in lust, you've committed adultery in your heart, so you've already violated one of the Ten Commandments. So it's actually an intensification that modern Judaism kind of rejects. But they're only 0.183% of the population, so we don't really factor that in too much. But it said that essentially that like for a husband and wife, that their bodies are for each other, that the husband's wife is not his husband's wife, sorry, husband's body is not his own, and the wife's body is not her own, but they are literally for one another. So that means if the wife wants sex, then have at it. then yes, then she deserves to get what she wants. And likewise, if that, so in some ways it's meant for like mutual desire is assumed. It's
Mm.
not, there's no patriarchal, like men like sex and women don't like it. None of that exists in Christianity. Now, does that exist in people pretending to be Christians? I just read a stat from Pew that said like 50, close to 50% of professing Christians say that casual sex, there's nothing wrong with casual sex. So I was like, oh, okay, that's you. Then that's not a Christian point of view. So just because you are a Christian and, or profess to be a Christian and say something that is not part of the, it's actually not part of the schematic. You know what I mean? That would be like an American saying like, well, yeah, like freedom of speech is good until I don't like it. And then you're not allowed to say anything. You're like, okay, but that's not what the Constitution says. So no, you're wrong. Like you're literally just wrong. That's against you broke the schematic. That's not an American point of view. You're like, well, I'm an American. You're like, yeah, but yeah, you're not, you're a citizen, but you're not being an American right now because that's literally not that's not how we get down. So in some
Yeah.
ways, I just I say that to like a break a lie that people say I get it once a week. I see it once a week, but also like that's a joyful thing. You know what I mean? Which means sex is like that there are ways to be obedient or disobedient, which maybe would get you slightly close to sacred, in terms of sex, but that it's meant to be like richly explored, and it is meant to be fun and poetic and hungry and what it, like I don't know, like once you're in, basically once you've like literally committed, then go crazy. So that's it's wild to me that I don't understand how that mythos came about. Or have you even seen that mythos, or am I ranting about something that has never been
Well,
said?
no, it came up the other day with the Puritans and your gentle correction that kind of pretty much the same thing. And it, reminds me, in my work we do talk a lot about safe spaces, brave spaces, where you can express yourself. And but I
Yeah,
often say, well, look, I mean, a safe space is kind of like safe sex. I mean, it doesn't really exist on and maybe
yeah,
usually I think we mean the big risks like pregnancy and STDs, right?
yeah,
Or STIs. Uh, but so much of my work is focused on the emotional space, that, and
yeah,
I don't just mean like sexual abuse. I just mean even like a, so-called healthy active sex, like especially if somebody's newer to it, is gonna probably bring up a lot of feelings of all kinds of different sorts. So this idea
mm,
of, where does quote unquote safe sex exist the most reliably? To me,
yeah,
that's how I'm translating all of that. It's like, wow, it's the most, first of all, in my experience, like sex tends to get better the longer you're with somebody. I mean,
mm,
or at least, I don't know. Actually, you've been in that game much longer than me, so I'm curious where you are. But at least like the idea of like a one night stand, which I have done,
mm,
versus even just being with somebody for like 6 months. Like it takes
sure,
a while to, get to know a person and a body and all that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've been, I think far more slutty than you. But so I have that at least data set to work from.
yeah,
But this idea of now that I am in a monogamous marriage, loving and feeling actually far
mm,
more freedom
yeah,
to be with one person and to fully explore that with one person and to, you know, certainly not worry about STIs and actually then pregnancy, hope, for many of us becomes like actually something then to pursue and
yeah, yeah,
um so the whole equation kind of changes. But then even on the emotional side, it's like as a subset of a much larger part of an emotionally healthy relationship, you can explore that too. If something is
yeah.
doesn't feel right or just is off or just is big, it doesn't even have to be bad, it's just big. It's just big emotions. Like, well,
Yeah, yeah, that's where yeah, we're talking. I mean that's the I think the fact-based element of the Taoist sort of consideration is there's strong energies in sect, like whether it's short, long, long term, the short term partner, like the thing itself generates heat that is not merely physical. There's a lot going on. Well, and we probably both know this evidence or whatever, but like Stronger religious beliefs are linked to higher levels of sexual satisfaction. Um, that's been shown in multiple studies. This is one from the Journal of Sex Research. Um, so it's interesting that like we can actually, and we all know this, right? I mean, like we've all seen the headlines at least, that like whatever married people report the most satisfied sex lives or whatever. So even if we're pointing to, but this is the interesting thing, that's all pointing towards these ideas of pleasure, power, etc. Where I'd say in terms of sacredness, the central thing is obedience. So like centrally, it's like, is this for God? Like, am I doing it in a way that is pleasing to God or gods, or in the sort of in the dharmic sense, it's not really pleasing to God so much because gods are kind of just like whatever elevated power. Well, Tao is less so, but like in Buddhism and Hinduism, the gods are kind of like elevated above us, almost like angels. So it's harder for them to attain enlightenment, but they're above us in terms of the enlightenment ladder is how I've had it explained to me or read it through as well. Both. It's interesting then this idea of uh, pleasing becomes only pleasing oneself, which then suggests, does that create a paradigm in and of itself outside of the sacred where it's entirely selfish? Even then pleasing someone else is about our self-satisfaction. So then again, this is my theory anyway, that like if you remove God or gods, which the majority of humankind is like, yeah, there are something's around and something personal in some way is around. It's not ephemeral. Um, and that has decided ideas about things. Uh, if you remove that, then essentially you replace it with a non-sacred paradigm, which is self, like I decide, right? This
Yeah.
is the idea of external ethics or internal ethics. Internal ethics. Now, if you never change your internal ethics, you're at least holding to an ethic. Oh, and you said something that sparked this whole thing in my brain. You're talking about especially when people are like inexperienced, right? When they're new to the end of the to losing it, whatever that means. This is the thing I've noticed over time is especially because I knew had a lot of friends who I was around them or friends with them when they did begin having sex is how it changes over time. And I've noticed, this is my theory, that people actually kind of get a culturally approved callous on themselves, that they reduce their sensitivity to what sex is doing to them over time, largely due to like cultural shame, which has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with the secular framework, which is about self pleasure, self ownership, which is about sovereignty over self. No one can tell you. I remember from the Salt and Pepper song, if I want to be a freakin', sell it on the weekend. It's none of your business. Like that sort of, that's what our culture tells us, which is opposite what the consensus of spiritual science. Um, and I've watched that happen to men and women. And then over time, they just become, let's say, more and more quote unquote slutty or whatever. It's funny, I've never used that word. I don't think in this context, but I just don't like the word. My dad used to call me up and leave that voicemails for me. And he'd be like, slut, hey man, how you doing? So, and I hated it. I was like, A, I'm not a slut. B, I don't really know why you're saying that. And
Yeah.
C, I don't, and C, I don't, he just thought it was funny. That's like when like whatever lady friends called him up and they're like, bitch, how you doing? That sort of thing. I think that's what he was emulating. But I didn't like it. And I finally was just like, please don't do that. I don't know. I don't like the word. As soon as I said it, it's icky. Anyway, but it brought that up for me that I was like, oh, this is an interesting thing that I've watched where this is the lost part, or the Mike Figgis film, the loss of sexual innocence. That like when you begin to engage in sex, it I think it invokes this like godhood of selfness. So that's where the sacredness paradigm comes in for the new age, or even like a professed secular person. The God is them. The God is you. The God is Andy. The God is Brendan. So then I'm the
I mean,
yay.
Jesus, like Jesus, praise Jesus. No,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you can create another human with it. I mean, my God.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's a powerful form of, especially of invasive dominion over another person,
Yeah,
for a man or for a woman. It's an enormous amount of power of literally like enveloping, literally you like whatever physically. I'm not a woman, sorry. This is me. This is just like in empathy and understanding and imagination of like, oh, you're enveloping like the sort of power structure with your power structure and
yeah,
taking it in, and then and actually like this is the funny thing is you win most of the time. Women win, meaning the sort of like the blood engorged man part which again, whatever this, what is that, Simone de Beauvoir, who's like the girl's first toy is a doll, so she empathizes more with other people, and the male's first toy is his penis. So then he's like relates to himself as the arbiter into the world. Anyway, I don't know about that theory. I just always thought it was fascinating. But then like the man puts his penis inside, and then when it comes out, it is way less uh, tower-like, impressive. It returns to its like kind of floppy, silly, shrimp-like state. You know what I mean? Whereas that is not like, so in some ways it is like it's there's a dominion element, I think, and there's a power thing that people get kind of that I think it's part of sexual addiction, or it's part of also sexual pleasure to be able to surrender to that. So like literally be like, take my power. You know what I mean? Enter my body. And then for a man, take my power. Take it. That's for later my I'm surrendering to you. And again, this is perhaps the marriage thing too, or even the patriarchy thing, which is like in committed safety. So if nothing else, you've committed not just like through consistent action, but you've committed actually publicly.
Right.
You've said to everyone, I am this person's ultimate safety, even in a challenging way. And then likewise, she's like, I'm your safety. Hey, cool, I'm your safety. And at that point, you're like, oh, so then this act of surrender becomes not like a thrill-seeking daredevil thing. It becomes like it's just as intense, but it's an intense practice of surrender and giving and taking, and that's a
And everybody
lot.
knows, and everybody knows what's happening on that wedding night.
Unless you get too drunk. That always makes me sad for people.
Or just
Like,
fall asleep.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. You're like, that wedding was awesome but exhausting.
a tuck-in thought here before we wrap.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I know a sex coach actually. She focuses on women in particular, and
Mm.
she made a comment to me once. She was just like, her clients love being subservient. That
Mm.
obedience, like, and
Yep.
we could call it a lot of things. Maybe a fetish, maybe just a preference or whatever. Um, but it could seem confusing in the way that feminism is often
Yeah.
portrayed, especially,
Sure.
right, where I think the way you're looking at it is fascinating, where it's like, yeah, I mean, giving up our power is a powerful act. Um,
Yeah.
um, well, let's revote. Is sex sacred? I'm
Oh
gonna
gosh.
double down on no. This has convinced me no in the strictest sense.
Yeah, I would say I have to. I mean, over like really processing all of it, I have to. It's almost like a sideways thumb, whereas there is because it's in sacredness. This is like in in the religious contract construct, which sacredness specifically and explicitly has to do with. The submission is triangular. It's polyamory in and of itself. Just a monogamous, committed marriage, a sexual relationship. I'm almost doing like a scissoring motion with my hands. I don't know why I did that, but that's what happens. It's a triangular submission. So meaning it's submission one to another, and it's submission to, in this case, has to be God or gods, or in my profession of knowledge, that it would be specifically like in submission to God. So in that case, if one could make a tenable argument, so I can't put my thumb all the way down anymore, make a tenable argument that all sex enacted in submission one to another and submission to God would be could arguably be sacred. Now, I'm not convinced of the argument, but at least through processing this, I'm convinced that it's tenable. So I'm gonna have to do a rare sideways thumb, which I hate to do, but had to happen today.
Well, always a pleasure to explore any topic with you, my brother. Coming
Likewise,
up,
man.
and I love you. We'll talk to
Love
you soon.
you.